And good evening, MFHL fans. Welcome to this week's edition of the MFHL Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Graham the G Show Forsyth. This week's edition of the show, as always, brought to you by McCann Fasteners and Tools. Check out their store locations in Brandon and Winnipeg to check out their store and buy some of their products if you're in the need from something from your number one stop for all your industrial needs. Be sure to also check out their website at McCannFasteners.shop for more information on them and their products. Also brought to you by Terrico, serving Manitoba producers for over 80 years in the agricultural industry. Be sure to check out their brand at Terrico.ca for more information. And to Goaltenders, your goalie's personal video review service, check out their website, GordyTomlinsonGoalies.ca, for more information. Thank you to those three brands for being official sponsors of us here on the network on G-Show Productions and gshow.ca, and for supporting Manitoba female hockey at the U18 AAA level. In terms of the Manitoba Female Hockey League, there's only one more game until the playoffs are officially underway. Playoffs will be starting next week, but before we get into that, there's a lot to talk about in terms of what went down in this past week, this last full weekend of full action in the MFHL, and we had a chance to broadcast one of the games, that being the Pembina Valley Hawks in Niverville to take on the Eastman Selects on a late Saturday afternoon affair. And this game, it was sort of back and forth, but it would end up being the Eastman Selects taking it. Let's throw it to some highlights to show you guys how it all went down. Into the first period, already up 1-0. It would be Sophia Heidinger in the slot, putting away the backhand pass, Cassia Rakowski, to give Eastman a now 2-goal lead at this point in the game. Moving over to the second period, Pembina Valley would start to get stuff going on the power play. It would be Emma Duran putting one home, tapping one home, picking up the loose puck off of the rebound, and Pembina Valley wouldn't be done there in this short span of time. Jessica Anderson, who had a assist on the first goal, ends up winning the battle down low to get the puck, feeds Ava Dale Bozic at the side of the net at that right face-off circle, as she one-times it, fooling Addison Tomes, and we're square in this game at 2 apiece in the second period. But later on, with Eastman regaining a 1-goal lead, it would be Danielle Hepner scoring her second of the game. She would end up scoring the game winner, that 3-2 goal, but an absolute rip from her coming out of the corner, going around the net, and sniping one past Cassia Rakowski. Eastman would hold on to take that game by a score of 4-2, and to set themselves up to retake third place in the MFHL in their Sunday matchup, where if they won it, they would do exactly that, and they would do exactly that, taking down the Central Plains Capitals 5-1. As we take a look at all the scores from this past week 18 in the MFHL, it started off with a really close one. The Winnipeg Ice beating the Westman Wildcats by a score of 2-1 in a shootout. Central Plains actually had a really good week for themselves, probably their best week or one of them of the season, grabbing 2 wins, beating Pembina Valley and Interlake by a score of 3-2 there, 6-2 over PV. Yellowhead, of course, having themselves a pretty successful weekend, taking down the Winnipeg Ice and also beating the Winnipeg Avros. Those two will be facing off in the playoffs, which is crazy. 2 traditional powerhouses at this point in the MFHL. As you can see there, Yellowhead and the Avros finishing in the 4 and 5 spot. All games are pretty much done in the MFHL except for one, an upcoming matchup this Saturday between the Eastman Selects and the Interlake Lightning. Eastman has a chance to tie the Wildcats in points for second place, but they won't be getting it since they were 0-4 in the tiebreak against them, the head-to-head this season. As for the Winnipeg Ice, even though they ended their season with a loss to the Yellowhead Chiefs, that big win against the Wildcats last Friday was enough for them to take home first place and to secure it. And to come on the show this week as the only guest is the head coach of the reigning first place, reigning champion Winnipeg Ice, who were looking to go on a consecutive championship run this season. But Eugene Kaminsky, head coach, really humble guy, maybe one of the most humble coaches in the league, knows that this season hasn't come without its challenges, without their ups and downs. And he even said, and he'll say it in this interview, that he believes that there's not only them, but 5 other teams that he believes have a legitimate shot in terms of taking home this year's championship. It was great to catch up with Eugene on this week's edition of the MFHL podcast. I guess on this Valentine's Day edition, since the holiday is today, but yeah, Eugene Kaminsky, head coach of the Winnipeg Ice, coming on now in this edition of the MFHL podcast, brought to you by Make Cannon Fasteners and Tools, Terrico, and Goaltenders. Winnipeg Ice bench boss joining me next. Eugene Kaminsky joining this edition of the MFHL podcast. Eugene, it's crazy because the last time I talked to you was at the start of the season. Now we're getting ready for playoffs at this point, as the playoffs for the whole league kicking off next week. There's still one more game to be played, of course, Eastman versus Interlake this Saturday that we're going to be covering here on the network. But this Winnipeg Ice team for another season, finishing in first place in the league, with a 24-4 record, first in goals for, tied first in goals against. Dominance really on paper this season. Talk about what it was like seeing this group go out and repeat, similar success to last year.
Yeah, I think we talked about that before, where earlier on when we talked about how after you win a championship, everybody has a bit of a target on your back, and you know that people are gunning for you. And so if you're going to have a game, you have to make sure you're going to be at your best. And that was one of the things we preached right from day one, is that we can't expect anybody to come out with a lazy game against us. They're going to be giving us their best every single game. And so we need to be prepared for that. I was really, really, really proud of how the girls been able to produce that and been able to show how well they can play against some very stiff competition this year. It's been a very tough season. Previous year, I will admit, we had some easy wins, and I don't think we had too many easy wins this year. That's for sure.
Yeah, and just looking at it, this team in their last 5 games to end the season, 3-1-1, a loss in Interlake, and they're losing the last game of the season. This past Saturday, 4-3 in OT to the Yellowhead Chiefs. Interlake, though, that's a team that ended up beating this Ice team twice this season. A team that, even though they're near the bottom of the standings, gave the top teams like yourselves a run for their money, and were able to beat them this season. So I had a chance to speak to you before we called one of our final games of the season for you guys, and you said you feel there's no clear favorite this season going into playoffs. Talk about what it's been like truly seeing that parity come to the full front this year in the league.
Yeah, I think it's very evident, and especially in the back half of the season. I truly feel legit. There's about 6 teams that any team can win this league. I think in previous years, if I looked at everything that we've played, you always had 2, maybe 3 teams that you would say were legit contenders, and you can anticipate they were going to win it. And the rest of us at times were just like trying to make it into that opportunity to have those chances. This year, though, legitimately, I think you can take any top 6 team right now, and I think you're going to legitimately say, and they could win it. We played Interlake, and I think Interlake's a perfect example of a team that's been able to really find their stride in the second half of the season. They found the opportunity to get some really good goaltending, some timely goals, some really good defense. They beat us. We played them 3 times over the past month, and they beat us twice. So that's a team that I know if I was playing them in the first round, I'd be a little bit nervous about it because you don't know what's going to come. So, and then if you take a look at all the other teams above that, same thing. Like I think we split with Westman and split with Yellowhead. I think actually Yellowhead won the series, I think 3-1 against us. So there's no, and Eastman, I think it was a split as well. So you can't expect any one team to walk away with this. It's a coin flip with 6 teams, basically. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, and Interlake going up against Eastman in the first round should be a fantastic series that we're going to be covering here on G Show Productions as well, along with your series, Eugene, coming up against the Central Plains Capitals. But before we get into that, like you said, talk about having a target on this team's back heading into the season, being the defending champs and being two-time finalists. Get in first place, like you said, nothing really came easy as the season went along. This team benefited from a really great start as well. But do you feel like it's kind of a blessing in a way for this team to go through as many tight games this season, given that, yes, there's experience, but quite a bit new players on this team as well?
Yeah, and I think that's always the difficult thing when you have that mix of returning players and new players. I think the returning players know what to expect going in, not just into playoffs, but obviously into a regular season. They know how to prepare for it. They know how to be ready for it. They know what our coaching style is and they know what our systems are. And that's easy for them. And then you have the new players that come in and they're still trying to figure it out. And I think if you were to take a look at any team, especially in the same situation, this is not something that's just restricted to us, but all those first year players are trying to figure out the game, the speed, everything that goes along with it, and the players, the experience. And it takes them a while for them to gel. And so we were fortunate. And I think if you take a look at any team, and I think that's where the parity starts to come into play. We had a strong veteran core that was returning, especially on our D core. So allowed us to get off to a really good start with all the other teams with their new first year players figuring it out. And then as the season rolls along, those first year players start to figure it out. They get comfortable with the coaches, they get comfortable with the game, and all of a sudden that gap starts to narrow quite a bit. And now you're starting to see that where that, as you say, that parity is coming into play, where their first year players are now playing as well as they can play, and you're starting to see teams perform a lot much better. And I think that's what you're seeing now, and that's why that gap is closing quite a bit.
Right, and makes perfect sense, right? If you're used to something and you have that advantage like this team did, having, a good amount of new players, but a strong group of veteran players, yeah, definitely does benefit a team like you guys. And these girls were able to go out and, capitalize on it. And really, as the season's gone along, I mean, Eugene, Stephanie Jacob has been the story of this year's team, leading the team in goals with 31, leading the league in goals and points with 45 points in 27 games. Absolutely ridiculous. But seeing Cassie Carvalho step up and really make a difference as the season's gone along as well. Talk about what it was like getting a chance to watch her develop and evolve into a reliable player at this point in the year.
Well, and then again, just as I said earlier, that's a perfect example of a player it took some time to figure out how the AAA U18 game is being played and how you play at this level. A lot of players, especially in an individual like Cassie, who has a lot of skill coming into the league, probably got away with a lot of things that she could do at the U15 level. And we talk about this with all our parents that are coming from the U15 and the players for sure, that it's not the same game. And as much as we say that, sometimes that doesn't necessarily resonate with everybody until they actually go through it. And that's where frustrations happen and the lack of confidence starts to come in. And Cassie is a good example of that, where I think there was times that she was even doubting if she could even be able to perform because she struggled early on. And it really came down to how you play the game when you don't have the puck. There's no doubt about it. Cassie, when she has the puck, she's a very intimidating individual. She has a fantastic release, a wonderful puck sense when it's around the net. She can find open players. It just mattered what she needed to do when she didn't have the puck. So on the defensive side and how she had to work for it. And now she's starting to find that stride. And there you go. And there's an individual now that becomes another important piece to this team that allows us to be competitive with everybody.
Yeah, and I mean, Cassie picked it up as the season's gone along, and more players started to score outside of Jacob. She's been carrying the load for most of the season, as you know firsthand. Eugene, getting a chance to watch it this season. 91 goals for this team. She's got 31 of them. She was one of the best players in the league when she came in a few years ago. She is, I think, the undisputed best player in MVP for this year's regular season. Talk about what a treat it's been to truly watch her and see her thrive as the seasons went along.
Well, I think it's been so fantastic for myself and the coaching staff that's been involved with Steph to watch her from her very first year into the league grow into a player that she is now, that's just dominating. And we think back at some of the highlight reel goals we saw in her first year, even in her in playing, and then in the second year, and then obviously this year, what she's been able to do, literally carry the team on her back, through many games. And being able to watch a player like that, like it's just, you check all the boxes when you say this is the type of player you want on your team. She checks every single box. I don't think you can find a characteristic of a hockey player that you want on your team that she doesn't hold. You can see that she can score, she can shoot, she can skate, she can move away from people, she can puck control, she can pass, she can play physical, she can play finesse, she can play defense, she can play offense, and she can turn it on a dime at any moment. So I don't think there are too many flaws in her game that we can pick up on, if any. So it's a real treat to be able to have her when you just open up the gate and you go let her go, because the other team is worried when she's on the ice, which opens up the ice for everybody else on the team.
Yeah, she's a true difference maker. I mean, from the first shift we got to broadcast of her this season on MFHL game day, it was evident, and she's had some big performances here on the network. And, like you said, her skill set, she's so good that she'll draw players to her and open things up. Seems like she has a lot of trust in her teammates. It seems like this whole team has a lot of trust in each other. One of the best puck moving teams that I've had a chance to see this season, covering a majority of your guys' games as the season went along at home. But talk about, is this the biggest strength of this Winnipeg Ice team? Is just the overall talent from top to bottom in terms of being able to move the puck and execute on the systems?
Yeah, and I think, again, that's one thing we've always stressed, from not just for this year but previous years, is just puck movement. We work on a lot of designs on being able to make sure that players are ready to receive a pass, and obviously players are looking to give out those passes. I think one of the things we've been very good at is trying to educate players that come into our team and come into the league for the first time, and trying to either redesign their game so they're looking for players, or sometimes we have to just strip them totally with regards to some of the bad habits they have. And I think they all benefit from that. And you see that you can put anybody, we've moved our lines around, and it's not that hard to find a combination that works at any given time. So I think that is a credit to the girls that have been able to understand that we're trying to teach them. They work hard in practice. They're doing what we're preaching, and so that translates into games. And I think you're right. I think one of the things I'm very proud of about this team is people come to me and they'll say, I love how you guys move the puck. I love how you guys are always finding each other on the ice. And so that has been a big thing for us, and it's been a big thing for us for the past 3-4 years. So we want to continue that way for sure.
Yeah, and definitely been a recipe for success. A team that has made the finals in the past 3 seasons in a row.
Yeah.
But you talked about splitting up players and changing up the line. Stephanie Jacob and Chloe Nicholas. You could argue the best duo in the league. You split them up, and I assume it was to create more balance, to create more threat throughout the lineup. Talk about what impacts that's had on the lineup from the experience from watching it.
Well, and I think, and that's another thing that we've worked on as a coaching staff, is we've tried to get some of these new players coming in to play with some of the veterans, whether it was on defense, whether it was with the forwards, get them an opportunity to find their space, find their opportunity to get comfortable and confidence. And Chloe is a perfect example of that, where she had an opportunity to play with Steph, and obviously anybody that plays with Steph, you're just going to make your game better. And allowed her to get comfortable in the game. And then we even had Cassie play with Steph for a while. And we had different players play with Steph, and Steph playing with different players. And now, yeah, you're right. Chloe is now, we moved them apart, gives us different looks, gives us different options. it makes it difficult for other teams to just focus on one aspect of our team. And I think that's a key point. As soon as you go down to one line, it becomes a lot easier to coach against, for sure.
For this team, Eugene, ranking top half and just about at the top in just about every major statistic. Like I said, 91 goals for, first in that category, 48 against, tied first with Eastman, 23.5 shots against per game, second least penalties taken this year in the league at 148. Even though there isn't a clear favorite, just having as strong of a track record as this team is had, how confident does that make this coaching staff, knowing that this team has had that strong consistency throughout a full 28 games?
Well, I think, and that's again what we've talked about from day one in September, and we always said, like, it's all about habits throughout the year. We want to generate positive habits and going through the year, and we've had to do that, and we've had to do some resets with the team and say, this is not what we want, this is what we want. We've had to talk about that, and the players understand that. And so we did have some bad games early on, and we just, hey, we need to learn from that. And even with our good games, we applauded that, but there's things we need to say, okay, that has to be consistent. It can't be a one-off. Okay, we have to improve from that. And you're right, if you have that consistency, you hope that consistency is going to translate into the playoffs. But as we know, that once you get into playoffs, anything can happen. You can be subject to a bad bounce, bad call, an injury or two, and next thing you know, you're struggling to stay in it. And so if we can fill as much consistency throughout our game, hopefully all those bad things that could happen are limited.
Gotta ask this question because obviously, like talked about, players have gotten better and more comfortable throughout the season, but everyone knows in the league, and I feel like you guys even know this, I think you've even alluded to it, that this team, the success runs through Stephanie Jacob. It's most likely going to be the game plan of many teams that this team faces come playoff time to try to strategize to shut her down. She's got 31 of the 91 goals. Do you feel do you feel confidence in this group that they can pull through outside of Jacob if she, maybe starts getting limited more than she has in other times this year?
Well, I think that's all part of the team concept, right? The players need to understand that there's going to be games where Steph or our goalies or our defense don't play well. Other people have to pick it up, and that's the whole team concept, right? And there's no doubt about it. Other teams are going to work to try to limit Steph, and even in games when Steph doesn't register a point, she's still very effective. Whether it's on the defensive side, whether it's getting a lot of shots to the net, and especially when she has the puck, it makes other teams a little bit concerned. So again, like I said, it opens up the ice for us. What that means is the other players have to be ready to receive those opportunities, and they're going to have to step up. So when Steph is not on the ice, the other players that will be on the ice need to perform at their best. And we can't be relying upon Steph. And I think as good as she is, we're not going to win a championship with her alone. It has to be a whole team concept that comes through. And if that does happen, we'll be successful. And if we don't play as a team, then we won't be successful. That's for sure.
Yes, and this Winnipeg Ice team has had many contributors throughout their championship run last year. Not just one player will be a key to not only their success, but anybody's success who ends up going on this championship run this year. But going into this series against the Central Plains Capitals, 4-0 against them. All of those games weren't even really close. But going up against a team with arguably the best goaltender in the league that, who knows, maybe she could end up playing so good she steals the series in Elise Denbo. But this group of girls has a great goaltender in herself. That's, I think, one playoff MVP in Laura Melissa. I assume he's going to be trusted upon majorly in these playoffs coming up. Talk about what it's been like getting a chance to see her continue to thrive in her game into another season this year.
Yeah, I think Laura is a perfect example of dealing with some adversity with regards to the spotlight of a number one goalie. In her first year, it was Laura that got us to the finals. It was her game and her play that was able to beat some top teams like the Avros and get us up against the Westman team. And then even with that, keep us in it. And it was up to Laura in her first year. And then in the next year, it was Jordan Stepaniak Sargent that then stepped up. And Laura had to take a backseat role to that in the playoffs because Jordan was playing amazing. And Laura knew that, if I want this spot, I have to fight for it back. And to her credit, she just didn't assume that she was going to get it. She had to earn it, and she did. And this year we've been seeing some great goaltending from her. I'm liking where her game is at right now. And like you said, Central Plains has a fantastic goalie in Denbo, and I know we're gonna probably get close to 40 shots on her. And we have to hope that we get about 3 or 4 that somehow sneak in. I know Laura can hold us to hold to 1, maybe 2. So we're going to have to get at least 3 on them. So it's going to be a good fight. I think you're going to see some really good hockey in that series. As much as you want to say we're not taking them lightly, it's you say that, but then you actually have to prove it. And that's the thing.
Yeah, and it's the psychology, right? I mean, you're the number one team in the league. They got a quarter of your win total at 521 into this season, and it's been domination in the season series this year. So yeah, anything can happen in playoffs. But for this Winnipeg Ice team, I mean, it's a series where would you say that this team is looking to obviously win it, but focusing on continuing to build good habits and not, I guess, exactly what we talked about, not playing down to your opponent's level?
100%. I think we are looking at continuing what we've built on so far. There's always some fine tuning that you're always doing, and we're going to continue to do that. But if you have the positive habits, and that's one of the roles of us as coaches, is to make sure that we're not allowing players to get in some lazy plays and lazy habits, and we will be on them, because at some point we're going to be going up against a team that's going to be very unforgiving when those lazy plays turn into turnovers. You might get away with it in certain situations, but against some of these teams, you make a lazy exit pass, and next thing you know, it's a 2-on-1 or a breakaway going the other way, and then next thing you know, you're fighting to try to tie a game up. And the games moving forward are going to be low scoring, and so they're going to be limited errors allowed for sure.
This Winnipeg Ice team, back 2 seasons ago, making it to the finals, ended up what was an upset at the time, upsetting the Winnipeg Avers in the semifinals, lost to the Westman Wildcats in the finals. Last season, avenging that, going undefeated throughout the playoffs, and this year, going into the playoffs as the number 1 seed, as already talked about, still with the target on this team's back. Out of your experience, what would you say is maybe the biggest challenge this playoff go around compared to the other runs?
I don't know what the biggest challenge is going to be. I think the biggest challenge might just be staying positive when things go bad. We were fortunate last year. We didn't lose a game in playoffs, and we didn't have to deal with that any adversity to be able to figure out how we had to battle back. So we were never down in a series. So for some players, that's going to be a new experience, and trying to figure out, okay, so what happens if we lose game 1, or if we're down 2-0? Like, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to react to that? That's going to be the challenge for me. And I think what we see from our team, because I do not know how they're going to react. I'd like to believe that I know how they're going to react, but you never know until once the situation presents itself. I love our leadership group. I love how they're able to maintain the positivity in the dressing room, even when we're in bad situations in games. And I love how they're able to step up and show that they can help this team move forward within the game. But like I said, we've never really experienced that significant adversity of being potentially eliminated out of a playoff. And I anticipate that's going to happen this year. And I want to see how we react to that. And if we react well, I think that's again, what more can you say? That's what you want. And if we don't, well, then the conversation is, well, it was a good season, guys. Let's move forward. So
I think you summed it up well there, Eugene, and excited to see what this Winnipeg Ice team can do in the playoffs. All of their home games will be broadcasted on gshow.ca on G-Show Productions. Game 1, 8:10 p.m. puck drop on next Tuesday on February 20th. Eugene Kaminsky, head coach of the defending Winnipeg Ice Manitoba Female Hockey League, number 1 seed heading into this year's playoffs, looking to repeat their title on the title defense. Eugene, thank you for taking the time as always.
thank you, Graham, for everything, and thank you for G Show showing the interest in the league and the women's game. So thank you for all that. We really appreciate it.
And Eugene Kaminsky, head coach of the Winnipeg Ice, joining this edition of the MFHL podcast with playoffs just around the corner. First game is going to be played next week on Tuesday night at the Hockey for All Center between the Winnipeg Ice and the Central Plains Capitals. Going to be exciting to call that one, as G-Show Productions will be calling all of the Winnipeg Ice's home games for that first round playoff series, and however far they go in the playoffs. Also happy to announce that G-Show Productions will also be broadcasting the Eastman Selects home games for their first round playoff series against the Interlake Lightning. Also currently trying to figure out if we have capabilities to live stream over in the arenas and where Interlake's going to be playing, but their schedule isn't set yet, so going to be some time before we figure that out, and until the schedule drops at the very least for that those road games for that playoff series. All of the playoff matchups, well, for most of them are scheduled and out on MFHL U18AAA.com. But before we head into a transition here, before I talk about the points leaders, the stats leaders in terms of who's coming away as this year's scoring, points, assist champions, as well as wins champion, I want to get into the players of the week and goaltenders of the week for week 18. One of each, and the one goaltender of the week was Elise Denbo. Congratulations to her. She had the 2 wins that Central Plains had this past weekend, stopping a lot of shots in that victory against the Pembina Valley Hawks, 45 of 47. Stops made in terms of the shot she faced, and then making 37 of 39 shots against in that battle against Interlake, where Central Plains came out with the 3-2 victory. So congratulations to Elise Denbo, going to be the biggest X factor in that first round playoff series if Central Plains wants any shot against the Winnipeg Ice. As for player of the week for week 18, well, it's Ginger Fast. Feel like I've seen her name on this graphic a few times this season, ending off some of her final games of the year with a pretty strong performance, as you can see there, 4-point weekend. Congratulations to her, also being top 10 in the league in scoring this season. A point per game currently, pretty sure. 12 goals, 15 assists, and 27 games played, of course. She has a chance to add on to her point totals this weekend coming up against the Interlake Lightning in a warm-up game before that first round playoff series. We're going to take it to a transition here. Stick with me, Graham the G Show Forsyth, on this Wednesday night edition on February 14th of MFHL Podcast, episode 13. Brought to you by Make Canada Fasteners and Tools, Terrico, and Goaltenders. Stick with me for more after this. Well, you made it back to this edition of the MFHL Podcast. Had a chance to talk with Eugene Kaminsky. His team, the Winnipeg Ice, first place for another season. They'll be taking on the Central Plains Capitals starting next week in the MFHL playoffs on Tuesday, as we officially get underway for the playoffs, as that will kick things off for Game 1 of the 1 versus 8 series in the MFHL. We'll show you all these standings here once again. These standings are finalized at this point in terms of who finishes where, even if Eastman wins against Interlake coming up this Saturday in the regular season finale. They will finish in third, even if though they'll be tied with the Westman Wildcats. Westman having the season series head-to-head on them, sweeping them this season series. So, yeah, it's going to be Winnipeg taking on Central Plains, the Winnipeg Ice, that is. The Westman Wildcats taking on the Poundland Valley Hawks, the Eastman Selects taking on the Interlake Lightning, and in what is a coin flip in terms of if you're trying to predict series for the 4 versus 5 one this season. It's usually the toughest one to call, and it's going to be tough again. The Yellowhead Chiefs taking on the Winnipeg Avros. Both these teams splitting the season series as well, so should be a fantastic battle between two very well-coached teams. Yellowhead having the experience, though, compared to the Winnipeg Avros, where they're on the younger side of things. Yellowhead also finishing off their regular season stronger, so gotta factor that in. But nonetheless, expect a battle in that one, and either team could make it out of that first round playoff series. But in terms of the point leaders, right, been highlighting them every single week, showing you guys who's leading in what stat categories, and they're finalized at this point in terms of who's going to be finishing at the top. So let's get to it. I feel like it's no surprise for the points leaders and the goal leader coming up, Stephanie Jacob. Congratulations to her for taking home this year's scoring championship in the points, as well as leading the league in goals at 31. Ivy Perkin, one of the most impressive players this season in the MFHL, though, as you could see, ended up tied for second in points with rookie Rio Pierre. Ivy Perkin being a rookie as well, but she made her way up the leaderboards as the season went along to finish second in two major stat categories this season. So congratulations to her and to all these players who are in the top 5 at this point as the 2023-2024 season comes to an end, regular season wise, for the points and goals leaders there, as you can see. And as for the assist leaders, well, it's going to be, unless Ginger Fast comes away with a 10 assist or a 9 assist point night coming up this Saturday, it's going to be Chloe Nicholas who wins it. Congratulations to her. Chloe in her first year with the Winnipeg Ice, 24 assists in 27 games played, over a point per game at 30 points in 27 games played. Congratulations to all the players that made it onto this list. And finally to the goaltenders. Danica Averill was not at the top of this list until the season was winding down, coming to an end regular season wise, and for Miss Averill, she comes away with 13 wins, 4 losses, 2 of them being in OT this season as well, adding on to those 4 regulation losses for that 13-4-1-2 record. No shutouts on her season, but one of the best save percentages in the league at .932. Congratulations to all the goaltenders that made it onto this list. And hey, depending on who plays, whether it's Addison Tomes or Oriana Kennedy coming up this Saturday, Addison Tomes could end up tying Laura Melissa in the win totals if they're able to come away with that win against the Interlake Lightning. So yeah, congratulations to Danica Averill, though she finishes the season as the wins leader in the MFHL for regular season play. And oh man, it's the playoffs coming up, as you can see there on the 17th at 4 p.m. at the Niverville Recreation Center. It's the regular season finale between the Eastman Selects and the Interlake Lightning. Puck drops at 4 for that one. Will be shown on G-Show Productions on gshow.ca. And yeah, once that game is finalized, we look ahead to playoffs. As already mentioned, playoffs kicking off next Tuesday at 8:10 p.m. That's when the puck drops the PCL rink in the Scotiabank Hockey for All Center, at the Scotiabank Hockey for All Center, between the Winnipeg Ice and the Central Plains Capitals. We'll have that game live streamed as well, so don't miss it, as well as the game on the 21st between the Eastman Selects and the Interlake Lightning. Yellowhead and the Winnipeg Avros starting their series next Thursday night in Shoal Lake. And taking a look at that schedule, Pembina Valley going to be starting off their playoff series, I believe, on the Friday between the Westman Wildcats. So yeah, check out MFHL U18 AAA.com for all of the games, all of the results, and all things MFHL, that's where you guys can stay up to date. As well as on this podcast, MFHL, the MFHL podcast on G Show Productions. We're going to be running podcasts up until the end of this season, maybe even afterwards, a few weeks after, since the winner of this year's MFHL championship will be competing against the winner from the Saskatchewan Female AAA Hockey League to see who moves on to play in this year's SO Cup to represent the Western region that way. It's going to be a lot of fun. And by the way, everybody, Ferdy Nellison of the MFHL, former coach of the of the Central Plains Capitals, will be joining me for an MFHL playoff special coming out next Monday, where we will be previewing all 8 teams heading into the 2024 MFHL playoffs and giving our round-by-round series predictions on who we think is moving on and who we think ends up taking home this year's MFHL championship. It's going to be a lot of fun, and just a disclaimer at the end of the day, going to still be objective when covering these teams, no matter who I pick as my champion. I'm honestly, I don't even know at this point. I am in agreement with Eugene. Like, out of 5-6 teams in this league, like, anything can happen this season. I think that for the first time in a while, things are pretty wide open in the MFHL playoffs, and yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Like, so many great storylines heading into Eugene Kaminsky and the Winnipeg Ice. Can they go back-to-back and make it to not only a third straight final, but technically a fourth straight final in the MFHL? Can the Westman Wildcats make it back for a third straight year, and can they win a second championship in 2 out of 3 years? Is this the year that the Interlake Lightning continue to make noise in the playoffs and continue the great play that they've had in this regular season? Is it Eastman's year to go all the way again, having one of their best seasons in franchise history with an experienced core, with some good new players that have come onto that team, a team that's just really well coached, really good culture? Do we get flashes of 2017 when that team ran the table and ended up capturing a championship? The Yellowhead Chiefs, Hannah Ray, right, came on the show and said she felt this team's offense was unstoppable. They have one of the most loaded teams up front in the MFHL, and this is a team that one of the most well-coached teams in the league, and has been knocking on the door of winning a championship, or at least making it to that spot to be able to do so in the past 5 years themselves, right? And for the Winnipeg Avers, a team in themselves that have been chasing a championship for years, and kind of had their thunder stolen by the Winnipeg Ice, becoming the first Winnipeg franchise in this league to win a championship. They've been close every single season. They were at one point a top 2 team in the league, but they went back down to 5, had their late season struggles. But talking to Ashley Van Ekelen in that group, it hasn't really fazed them, it seems. And nonetheless, no matter what happens, if they go on a deep run or not, the experience for those young players will be huge. And then, for teams like the Pembina Valley Hawks and the Central Plains Capitals, right? From the way I've been speaking, the way that Eugene Kaminsky was speaking, and that everyone's going to be speaking pretty much when we talk about playoffs and stuff like this. These are 2 teams that are kind of counted out and kind of overlooked. Can at least Denbo have a historic series to potentially have the Central Plains upset the Winnipeg Ice, and can the Pembina Valley Hawks find another year in their game going up against a team in the Westman Wildcats? While yes, a top 2 team in the MFHL, a team that they were able to to beat, at least once this season early on. I can't wait for it. The regular season finale is going to be fantastic, coming this Saturday at the Niverville Recreation Center in Niverville, Manitoba. I can't wait to call that first playoff game next week, and for you guys to check out our MFHL playoff special with Ferdy Nelson coming out next Monday. I'm going to take it to one last transition here, folks. You've been watching the MFHL podcast for episode 13, brought to you by McKenna Fasteners and Tools, Terrico, and Goaltenders. Well, you made it to the end of the MFHL podcast, everybody. I've been your host, Graham, the G Show Forsyth. Thank you to you, the viewer, for tuning into this edition of the MFHL podcast. If you want to stay up to date with all things MFHL, what's going on around the league, especially at this point, as we are pretty much officially into playoffs. We're almost through the door. Of course, one more game to play. Regular season finale coming up this Saturday here on the network in Niverville between the Selects and the Lightning. But if you want to stay up to date and you enjoyed this episode with everything to do with the MFHL, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future uploads of this podcast. Next edition of the MFHL podcast is going to be coming your way next Wednesday, as we'll have our first look into what the results are in the MFHL playoffs. Can't wait for that one. Hoping to have some great guests on that one, some entertaining ones at that. Rumor is Danica Averill might be joining that show next week, so stay tuned for that. Might even have Derek Tibbetts on the show, head coach of the Yellowhead Chiefs. It's going to be a lot of fun. Blog article on the MFHL is coming out in the next 2 days on Sports in the Prairies, so stay tuned for that. We'll have our MFHL playoff preview article in Sports in the Prairies coming out at the start of next week before the playoffs, so that's guaranteed to get you all set with our previews, our picks, and all that great stuff. MFHL playoff special video. Might even make it a special edition of this podcast coming out on Monday with Ferdy Nelson, so you don't want to miss that one. And just to show you again in the MFHL, in terms of the standings, the first round matchups are set, even though there's one last game to be played. It's the Ice taking on the Capitals, the Wildcats taking on the Hawks, the Selects taking on the Lightning, and in what should be a fantastic series, maybe a first-round classic, you could even call it, depending how it goes. The Yellowhead Chiefs, the Winnipeg Ice, two powerhouses historically taking on each other in that first round, starting next week. And going to be fantastic, folks. Just to show you again the schedule for next week, it all starts with the Winnipeg Ice and the Central Plains Capitals in a game that will be broadcasted on G Show Productions, as well as that game the next day between the Eastman Selects and Interlake Lightning. Check out all of the results, all of the upcoming games, and everything to do with the MFHL at MFHLU18AAA.com. And, of course, be sure to check it back here. I've been your host, Graham, the G Show Forsyth, giving you the salute. Peacing out and waving so long, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Enjoy the weekend. Stay safe out there. And playoffs, folks, right around the corner. Enjoy it. Best time of the year. Take care, everybody.